Hello, Sarah. Welcome to Compassionate Women's Health Community. How are you?
Good, thank you. Hi, Belinda. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, my name's Belinda Chapman, and in this month of September, it is PCOS, Polycystic Ovary Syndrome Awareness Month. And so, I'm focusing the interviews, so her story, the personal story, and the practitioner stories around PCOS. And Sarah is joining us tonight to share her personal story and the influence it's had on her present career and undertaking. So let me just share her bio. So Sarah, is it done? Sarah Willoughby she began her life, a new life in Melbourne, Australia, empowering people to open their hearts and walk toward their challenges after her personal health wake-up call. Blessed to live by the sea, Sarah loves spending time in nature with her three beautiful children, her greatest teachers. She's created a book, Infertility Saved My Life, Healing PCOS from the Inside Out, which exposes the raw teaching moments of Sarah's journey to self-love through polycystic ovary syndrome and secondary infertility. Following her admission into intensive after a disastrous IVF cycle in 2009, Sarah promised herself that if she recovered, she would face her fears, commit to her calling, and make a difference in this crazy world, because as we know, life is short. So thank you so much for joining us. Do you mind now sharing your women's health story, your PCOS journey with us, please, Sarah?
Absolutely. So my journey with PCOS started when I was 12 and I started my first period, and I just never had a regular cycle. I had really heavy periods. They were painful. They would last for like 3 weeks and then stop for a few days and then start again. And for the first couple of years, the doctors just said, that's normal. Your body's just readjusting and don't worry about it. So, I was young and I hoped and trusted that that would be the case. Tried different things to manage it, like reflexology, and that definitely had benefits in terms of managing the pain, but didn't, treat the underlying issue. I never had any tests or scans or anything. They put me on the pill when I was about 13. And that was it then. It just masked all of my PCOS symptoms. And I was on that for 10 years. And I decided to come off it because I just wasn't feeling good on it. I'd gone through every brand you could try and it would work for a while and then not, and then I'd have lots of spotting, and it was just not making me feel good mentally either. So I took myself off it and I didn't have a period for about 12 months, and I knew that something was wrong. And that then started my journey through lots of medical tests and procedures, etc. But I still wasn't diagnosed at that point. It took a long time. I was living in the UK. I'm originally from the UK. It took a long time to get appointments with the right people and to finally get that diagnosis when I was about 25. And so by that point, I just felt really disillusioned. I was very focused on all the things that my body didn't do for me. And I was very fearful about my fertility journey because a friend had also recently been diagnosed with PCOS and she'd been told that she might struggle to have a child. So, I didn't have a lot of information. The first appointment that I went into where I was just told I had PCOS was literally, you've got PCOS, stay on the pill and manage it through your doctor. See you later.
Wow. Yeah.
And I know that that's quite common for a lot of women, that you don't feel empowered in living with your diagnosis.
And it's quite confronting to get a diagnosis like that. To hear, I remember getting my endometriosis diagnosis when I was 26, and them saying, "Oh yeah, and it might affect your fertility," and just going, like, your whole world just spins, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because for me, I was at that point when I was diagnosed that I was ready to have a family. I was ready to start thinking about that. And all of a sudden I was, it felt like I was setting myself up for this really difficult journey, but without the information, without the education, without support. There really wasn't a lot of support. It was very, I felt very dismissed. And I know a lot of women feel very dismissed in the medical system and don't understand that connection between mind, body, spirit, which is the journey that I've sort of gone on, in understanding that it isn't just a physical journey. It's all of those elements.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And so what led you to then realize that it had to be more than just this managing of the hormones through the pill?
So I never went back on the pill. I tried my best just to manage it within my own life. So I just managed the irregular periods. I managed the pain. I started learning meditation, and that was something that was really helpful for me in terms of reducing stress, because at the same time that I was going on this journey through PCOS and then secondary infertility, I was working in the corporate world, in corporate HR for a large multinational organization, and was dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And that wasn't helping the situation. And again, I know a lot of women can relate to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really hit me when I fell pregnant actually straight away with my first child. So that became a bit of a surprise, a beautiful blessing, a beautiful surprise. And had a very difficult pregnancy, and then gave birth to my son 2 months prem.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was really hard. He was in intensive care. You know, I was giving birth, not knowing whether he was going to be okay. I hadn't had my antenatal classes in how to give birth.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, again, that premature babies is, you know, you're at an increased risk of that with PCOS. I didn't know any of that at the time. But got through all of that. And then my journey through secondary infertility started, which is the journey that, you know, almost cost me my life.
And so you've got 3 children. So you had the secondary infertility with your second. Did you have it again with your third?
No. So what happened was I had my son, and then I went on this crazy journey through secondary infertility, which is when I was actually properly told exactly what was going on with my body. That was the first time I'd been given an ultrasound, an internal ultrasound. And the consultants said to me, "Oh, you've got really disturbed hormone levels. You've got 2 choices. You can go through ovarian drilling, or you can go through IVF." And I'd had this really difficult journey with lots of just the medical profession had not dealt with my situation well. I'd been referred to the wrong places. I'd been put on the wrong tablets. I'd been given a lot of misinformation that was very detrimental to my care. And so at that point, I felt very, very disillusioned that we were going to have to go back on the waiting list to be going through the fertility clinic, which is where I'd already been referred to, but I'd ended up in gynecology, and wait another 3, 6, however many months before I could receive treatment. So we made the decision to go over to Norway and have treatment over in Norway. It was a very small clinic, high success rates. You saw the same people. You didn't feel like a number, a statistic.
Yeah.
But my body reacted very badly to the drugs, and I overstimulated. So when they did the scan, they realized that I had about 30 follicles. I'd overstimulated.
Yeah.
They did the egg retrieval, and then they realized that actually this was getting quite serious, and they couldn't do the transfer back. And I ended up in hospital for what I thought was going to be one night initially. And I then ended up in intensive care, which was very, very confronting, with severe ovarian hyperstimulation. I had, you know, fluid on my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I'd put on about 20 kilograms of fluid in a matter of, 72 hours. I was at risk of blood clots. I had an enlarged heart.
Wow.
I was in so much pain. Morphine didn't even, surface the edge off the pain at all.
Yeah, wow.
And there was nothing they could do for me. It was literally, we can manage the symptoms, but we can't stop your deterioration. And I had this moment of watching my son, who'd come over to Norway. ironically, we thought that it was going to be a nice holiday, and that, it'd take the pressure out of the 2-week wait, like just make it into a holiday.
Yeah.
But he ended up going back to the UK with his grandma, and he walked out of the hospital doors holding his grandma's hand in one hand and his little rabbit in the other. And he looked back at me and smiled, and I didn't know whether I'd ever see him again. And that was a really pivotal point in my life.
Definitely.
And I just knew that I had to keep fighting because of him. And it wasn't really until after the process started to reverse itself, and that's what they were waiting for, before they told me how serious it had been. And I remember a consultant coming in to see me one night, and she put a hand on my leg and said, "You've been very lucky." And she was actually quite upset at the time. So I made a decision at that point. It's like, okay, if I get through this, if I recover, then I want to spend the rest of my life being of service, and I want to support other women and other people to face their challenges and face their fears and live their best life, because I realized that I'd been living this half life. And so from there I recovered, and then I went back to the UK, and we'd been lucky that they'd frozen the embryos. So I had 10 beautiful frozen embryos. When I recovered, I went back to Norway, had a frozen embryo transfer, and I fell pregnant with twins. And I was like, wow, this is how it was supposed to be. This was, I'd had this romantic notion about twins. I'm sure it's very different, but, I thought it was very beautiful. And unfortunately, I lost one, and then I lost the other one. And I was pretty heartbroken, because I'd already had a miscarriage previously. So before I'd fallen pregnant with the twins after my son, I'd had a miscarriage at that point after 2 years of trying to conceive. So I just wasn't, I don't think you can prepare for miscarriage again. It's something we don't talk about. It's something that is covered in a lot of silence and shame and stigma. And that's why I share my story, because I want to help break that silence.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely. So there were 2 embryos, or one embryo split?
Two embryos. And unfortunately went through that awful process of going for the ultrasound, being met by silence, and then I'm sorry, and and then it just unravels from there. And then I think I at that point surrendered. We were in the process of moving out to Australia. We decided to emigrate over to Australia to start a new life, and had originally been coming out as a family of 5, and now we're coming out as a family of 3. And knew that I was leaving behind my embryos in Norway, didn't know whether I'd have access to those, and came out. And remember moving to Melbourne and lying on my bed thinking, this is the first time in my life that I felt really truly peaceful, and just letting go. And then ironically, within 6 weeks of being in a new country where we knew nobody, had no jobs, threw everything up in the air and just started a new life, took a massive risk, I fell pregnant with my daughter, who is now almost 12. And it was just like she was my little miracle baby that had been waiting for me to move to Australia. This is where I want to live, Mum. And so I just I just felt so incredibly blessed. And then 4 years later, I had a little sister who is almost 8, and had no problems conceiving her whatsoever. It was like literally the minute I said to my husband, I want to try again, and he was very reluctant because of almost losing me and the miscarriages that we'd had. He said, we'll give it 6 months. And I had no natural cycle at that point, didn't know, and basically more or less conceived that night. So again, I think she was ready, and she was waiting. And so my message to people is just don't give up hope. You just never know. What the doctors don't have all the information. Our bodies are so complicated, and they're still learning so much about what works and what doesn't. So just keep holding on to hope, keep listening to your body and the messages that your body is giving you, and you never know what might happen.
So tell me about your sort of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month experience with PCOS now.
So my experience with PCOS now is still very the same, but it's changed in that when I was lying in hospital and I realized I'd been given a second chance at life, when I realized I was recovering, I actually fell in love with my body. That was the beginning of me accepting my body for the flaws and all, whatever that means, and just coming to a place of deep acceptance and love for all the things that it did do rather than the things that it didn't do.
Yeah.
And that
It's a
fundamentally
huge mental
changed
shift,
it.
isn't it?
It is. It's massive because, you know, it's just when you're in the medical process, when you're in the system, all you're focusing on is everything that isn't going right.
Yeah.
So you forget about all the beautiful things that your body does do. So that changed for me. And I still don't have a regular cycle. My period turns up whenever it feels like it. And I just live with that and I manage that. The pain is nowhere near as bad and it doesn't last as long. And it is pretty much, you know, like a 7-day affair as opposed to 3 weeks. So I think through just that acceptance, meditation, mindfulness, going out in nature, you know, grounding in nature, connecting with self and following my own spiritual journey, I've really learned how to just be compassionate with self.
Lovely. Now, in terms of your relationship with food, because I know PCOS with insulin and sugar, what's that experience like for you with diet and PCOS?
I've been really lucky in that I wasn't your typical, to look at me, I'm not your typical PCOS profile, which is maybe why I sort of got missed for a while. I've never had to worry about diet, what I eat. I mean, as I've got slightly older, you know, I will put a little bit of weight on when I could eat absolutely anything I wanted, but I still don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm mindful of is that when I've got my period, I just don't eat sugary foods. I try to avoid chocolate, which is my, you know, my one sort of sin that I have. I don't really drink alcohol. I don't drink coffee or tea. I don't have caffeine. So I try just to eat a very clean, balanced diet, but I don't obsess about food because I enjoy food and I don't want it to be a thing. But I think, you know, the balance of drinking lots of water, avoiding stuff that I know is bad for me, is what works for me.
Yeah, it's really that that inflammation and what's going to stir the pot, isn't it, in your body?
Yes.
And stir up those symptoms, particularly if you experience pain with your PCOS, then yeah. And that's in your ovaries then, like with the cyst, is that where you experience the pain?
Yeah, and just I get sort of like backache and just like heaviness in my legs, and I can't stand up sometimes for long periods of time on the first day, and then it sort of shifts. So yeah, but through meditation and like I said, going out into nature, those are the things that really help me get out of my mind, because I learned when I was in intensive care about, and through meditation, about breathing into your pain rather than trying to resist it. So that has made a massive difference to me as well, trying to make friends with my pain. Mindfulness practices and meditation practices can really help with that, realizing that your pain sort of ebbs and flows. It's not constant all the time, and just becoming an observer to your pain, I think takes the edge off it. It's what got me through when I was in intensive care and I was in the most excruciating pain. I'd actually been through hypnotherapy before my IVF cycle to get me in the best place possible. And she'd given me a load of meditation CDs. And if I hadn't have had those, I don't think I would be here. I think my mind would have got the better of me and I would have given up. So I'm forever grateful for that. And then once I came out of intensive care, I went back and had more hypnotherapy to deal with the trauma, because I knew that I would have to go bacan into that space and actually face that again. And I didn't want it to define me. I didn't want it to be a thing.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're talking to the converted here as a fellow hypnotherapist. Like,
it's amazing. Like I love it. Just we did this exercise where she took me back into the trauma and she just said, right, you're just going to play it until you get bored. Just play it on repeat. Play it over and over and over and over again until you're bored. And it worked.
Yeah, that's the VK dissociation, the fast phobia technique. Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yes.
Incredible. So I don't want to assume, you know, I'm hearing your story and I hear some like very intense moments. What out of all of that, when you reflect, was the biggest challenge you faced in your journey in this PCOS women's health personal journey for you?
I think initially it was getting my head around the fact that there was something wrong that couldn't be treated, so to speak. It was a condition that I was going to have for the rest of my life. And what was that going to look like? And how is that going to impact my future? And once I'd got to a place of surrender with that and accepting that, you know, nobody's perfect. We've all got something wrong with us, and, you know, in some capacity. I think that really did change that and shift that, and just being kinder to myself. You know, that compassion really helped that. But I think initially I saw it as a label and as a stigma and something that defined me. And again, I would say, that isn't the totality of who you are. Don't let that define you. It's a part of who you are, but it also makes us who we are in a beautiful way. You know, the person sat in front of you, yes, you might have your challenges, but you're still a beautiful person. And sometimes, you know, we can use our pain to find our purpose and to move through it into something much more fulfilling and meaningful. And so I'm grateful for the journey that I went on, because it actually helped me leave the corporate world. I never went back into the corporate world. And, you know, I began my own business and I do what I love. And so that was a massive part of that journey. But yeah, that initial diagnosis, the initial challenge of dealing with medical professionals who I felt very dismissed by and unseen, was not helpful. And so my message to people would be, if you know, get a second opinion, ask questions, don't be afraid to challenge in a respectful way what you've been told. Because I got told so many different things by so many different people. I got fed up of telling the same story over and over again. And so, you know, if you can find those people that you can really connect with, and find a tribe of people who are also on a similar journey that can be a support network for you. I think that's really super important.
I hear, you know, having done a lot of these interviews now, that common thread through the stories is that pure belief that you know your body best is what you need to keep bringing. And it can feel like a fight, but at the end of the day, you're moving towards your own health rather than, you know, fighting these medical professionals. That ability to advocate for yourself comes from that deep belief that something's not right. Like every single time I hear these stories, and women have taken years to get that diagnosis or have someone finally listen to them, it's that dogmatic something's not right, and that belief in themselves that is what's going to get them there. Because, you know, like these doctors, they see this full spectrum of different symptoms. As you said, like, you know, it could have been that just because you didn't meet all 11 symptoms, it wasn't as easy to diagnose. Not to give an excuse, but just to understand that, like, you've got to be the one who's saying something's not right. Someone finally needs to listen to me. So it is challenging. I count myself extremely lucky that it was like the first doctor that I went to. But having said that, I probably had endometriosis in my teens, and because I was sent home with, you know, day-long anti-inflammatory tablets to just deal with the pain. Thankfully not put on the pill at that point, but it was just here. Period pain's normal. Just take this anti-inflammatory, you'll be right.
I don't know whether I have endometriosis. I wouldn't be surprised if I do. When just before I left the UK, they were going to do a laparoscopy, but I didn't get the appointment until I'd already moved over to Australia, and I wasn't going to pay, you know, $5,000 to go back again for that. And then I actually got to a point of thinking, do I need to know the extra piece of the puzzle, or is that just going to make it harder for me to overcome the fertility challenges that I have?
Yeah.
And can I make peace with what I'm dealing with and how my body's reacting? And I chose that option. So I've never actually had that test done, but I wouldn't be surprised if I do too.
Yeah. Just listening to some of the symptoms that you've been talking with, that pain, like it being more than just like the cysts and the ovaries, like not being a medical professional, but and as you say, like just by managing your lifestyle, you're managing what could be endometriosis, but at the end of the day, is that diagnosis going to make a difference to you? Like, would you change your lifestyle for it? Maybe not. But
yeah. At some point I might have to look at it, but for now I think it's not impacting my life. So I feel like the saying of where you put your focus, what you put your attention on is what you keep given back. So I'm I'm just like, don't even look at it. It's fine. I'm blessed to have had my children.
Yeah.
And so I don't need to know that for that piece of the puzzle necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're looking after your body, you're looking after your health. That's the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the kindest thing that someone ever said or did for you on your journey?
So the most compassionate person I ever met was when I had just had my first miscarriage, and I'd had a D&C, I'd gone into hospital, and I'd ended up on the abortion ward, and that was very confronting. And I felt devastated, and when I came to after I'd had the procedure, I felt so lost, because it was almost like I was back at the beginning again. I hadn't made any progress. I was, I'd wanted them to take it away, but I also knew then that it was final. And so I was crying when one of the nurses came around to ask me how I was, and she asked me if I wanted to speak to the hospital chaplain, and I said yes. I wasn't religious, but I've always been spiritual, and I believed that there might be something she could say to help me understand why it had happened in this way. She was the first person, and probably the only person, that recognized my loss as a baby.
Yeah.
That was really, really important.
Yeah.
And she phoned me a couple of days later, and she asked me how I was going. And I said I wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And she actually organized a private funeral service for myself and my husband and my son. And I just thought it was going to be a few words, in the chapel at the hospital. But it was a proper service. And my husband got to carry the coffin, and they'd put baby Willoughby inscribed on a little plaque on the top. It was the tiniest coffin I've ever seen. We had a full service, her and another lady. And we watched the coffin, go behind the curtains. And it was hard. But it was cathartic. It was healing. It was what I needed to be able to let go. And then we went out into the garden afterwards. And I really do suggest very, very strongly that if you have suffered a miscarriage, that you honor that loss in some way. Yeah. Whether you do it privately and you write a letter, whether you plant a rose bush, whether you invite some of your close friends and family to acknowledge the life that will never be, but was. Because I'd already felt my baby growing inside me, like I'd already moved that baby into the second bedroom. My son was out of the bedroom, he was in the big bedroom, the nursery was already set up the minute I found out I was pregnant. So it was a huge blow, and I have never forgotten that chaplain's kindness, and I write about that in my book, because she didn't need to do that, but she gave me such a gift. And I'm very, very, very grateful for that.
That's really special. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Love it.
Pleasure.
So finally, not finally, but just one more question for now.
Yeah.
What advice would you give for others who have PCOS?
My biggest advice is probably be kind to yourself. Have your own back. Be your own cheerleader, be your own advocate. Find that support network of people who are going through something similar, because we can't always talk to those closest to us. Our family are not necessarily the people that are going to best understand what we're going through.
Yeah.
I found a support network just before I left Australia, just before I left the UK to move to Australia. And I wish I'd found them sooner, because a lot of friends didn't understand what I was going through. Even if they'd had a miscarriage, once they'd got their next baby in their arms, they were sort of like, it was old news, move on. So I think just having other people who understand that journey is really, really important. And try to do things to bring you joy, because I think I look back at that period of time and I felt like I wasted so much of my life being so engrossed in my fertility journey, so desperate to have another baby, that I missed out on watching my son grow up at times. You know, I was physically there, but mentally absent.
Yeah.
And it became my focus. It became everything, all consuming.
It
And
is.
I wish that I had planned that holiday, because, you know, if I'm pregnant, I'll work it out, you know, or that I'd done all the things that I wanted to do, but there were so many things that I put off just in case I was going to be pregnant, because I'd struggled through each pregnancy. I struggled with awful 24/7 sickness, as I lovingly called it. So
Yeah.
I knew that there were lots of things that it wouldn't be ideal if I had fallen pregnant to be doing. So I sort of put them off, you know, like, oh, I'll be pregnant by then, it's fine.
Yeah.
Live your life as best you can.
Yeah.
You know, focus on joy, find things that fill you up, things that you're passionate about, that will bring that much needed balance into your life that you do lack when you're living with PCOS, when you're trying to have another baby, whatever it is that you're going through.
Yeah. And what about the day-to-day living with PCOS? What advice would you have for women in just their understanding, like, say they've just been recently diagnosed with it and they're trying to comprehend what this is going to mean for them, not just the fertility aspect, but just the day-to-day living, like you know, that understanding of the cycle doesn't fit into that 30 days, 4 seasons. You know, what does that mean for someone with PCOS?
I think if I'd been diagnosed now, knowing what I know about me and how I best understand myself, I think I would journal and I would write down how I'm feeling. I would write down how my body is feeling. And I think I would be much better at noticing my own cycle that doesn't fall into that natural 30 days, because there's lots of other signs and symptoms and things going on. Even just your emotions, you know, like sometimes I'd be like, why am I so grumpy? Why am I so sad? And then it'd be like the next day I'll get my period and I'll be like, oh, okay, that was it. You know, like, so if I was better at doing those things to support myself, it wouldn't have caught me off guard so much. And I think just doing things that fill you up, so that you are nurturing yourself through that. I also really got a lot out of reading some books and gathering some information around the condition initially. I'm a real I have a need for information. And I think being educated and educating myself was helpful. But I would advise against going on Dr. Google. That can just fill you with a whole load of dread and, you know, worry, and that can be really detrimental. So, you know, pick and choose what you read and where you get your information from. But there's certainly some really good support groups and organizations and charities, and connect with people online. You know, I found an amazing community of people through LinkedIn, as we were talking about before we came on, who've got amazing stories through PCOS, endometriosis, infertility, all of those things and more. And I think just sharing our stories helps to take away that shame and the power that it has over us.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for coming into the community and sharing your story. There's so many elements that I know are going to resonate with so many women in the community, that when they listen in, they'll hear themselves in your story and hopefully gain something from it. And you've mentioned, and we mentioned before, that you have your book. So how can people order a signed copy of your book and all of that?
Yeah, so this is my book, Infertility Saved My Life, Healing PCOS from the Inside Out. Very blessed to get a publishing contract for that at the end of last year, which was huge.
Congratulations, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So the first part of my story is, the first part of the book is my memoir. It's my story. And then the second part is filled with tools, techniques, wisdom, insight that helped me through that really challenging time.
Yeah.
People who've already read that book have said that even if you're not going through infertility or PCOS, it's actually there's lots of information in there to support you through life generally anyway.
Brilliant.
Which is really good feedback. And there's, you know, tips and tricks for people who are supporting somebody through infertility and miscarriage, what to say, what not to say.
Yeah.
So people can hop onto my website, which is sarahwilloughby.com.au. And if they find Infertility Saved My Life, they can go onto that page and they can order a signed copy through there. They can also pre-order a copy through all the main online retailers. It's out officially on the 6th of December. And it's also available now as an ebook as well, if people want to do it that
amazing
way.
I'd really love for you when this goes, because we are pre-recording, when this goes up in the group, if you would love to share how people can connect with you and work with you and where to find the book in the comments, that'd be amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I will.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much again, Sarah, for sharing your story. I really, that resonates with me so much of how important it is to share our stories. It's, you know, I experienced a decade of, you know, fertility, like primary, secondary, you name it, IVF, the whole shebang. And it has quite an impact on our mental and emotional health. So you have a soul sister in that here and many others in the group as well, that, you know, just share that passion to spread their stories far and wide to reduce that shame and taboo surrounding these women's health conditions and infertility. So thank you once again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for all the beautiful work that you are doing. It's so important. You know, thank you for sharing your story, and you know, together we can break that silence for sure.
Yeah, I believe it for sure. Thank you, Sarah.